one of my favorite stories you've ever told, and I'd love it if you'd share it here. You talked about this sense that at some level, we always hear the comparison is a thief of joy, but you're the first person I ever heard say, but comparison's wired into us. We're social creatures. That's like, it's normal to look to the left and the right and see where we are. And you gave one of the most compelling, and Tony, it was so quick that I heard it, and it still stuck with me all these years later, a great conversation about you can be a builder or somebody that tears something down. But when you look to your right and your left and you see, I'm not where I want to be relative to those around me, or I have these dreams of being up.
Yes.
You can tear everybody down. Can you talk about that? Because I want my listeners to hear that, because it's just stuck with me so long. And it's so powerful, especially in a world that has told us if somebody has something, if they have a great business, they've got a great marriage, they had some hack, they had some privilege, they had something you didn't have, and so it's not fair that they have it. And so I'd love for you to talk about that.
I don't know exactly which one story you're talking about, example, but here's what I'd say. Maybe I can orient you towards my own evolution in this area. So when I was growing up, we had no money for food at times. On Thanksgiving, when I was 11 years old, we had no money for food. Now, we had saltine crackers and peanut butter, so we weren't going to starve. But, it's Thanksgiving. Everybody else having a feast, and it was pretty emotional. And my forefather and my mother were screaming at each other, saying things that once you say you can't take back. I have a younger brother, 5 years younger sister, 7 years younger. I'm trying to make sure they don't hear the conversation. And my whole life changed because there's a knock on the door, and I open the door, and there's this man standing there with two big, giant bags of groceries and an uncooked turkey on the ground. And he goes, "Is your father here?" Well, long story short, I got my dad at the front door. I thought he was going to be so happy. He was not happy. He's like, "We don't accept charity." And he went to slam the door on the guy. And the guy had been leaning slightly in, so it hit his shoulder and bounced out. He said, "Sir, I'm just the delivery man. Someone knows you're having a difficult time. It's like, please, you just accept this gift. And, they just want you to have a great Thanksgiving." And my dad went to close it again. And this time I hit the guy's foot. And my dad's really starting to get mad. The guy looks over and sees me. And he says to my father, I'll never forget, he says, "Sir, don't let your ego get in the way of taking care of your family."
Wow.
My dad, the veins in the side of my dad's face were just blowing out. I mean, he was so angry. But then he took the food and slammed it down. I thought he was going to punch the guy. And I remember I left that going like, why is he not happy? And a few weeks later, he left our family. It was the worst. I felt the worst moment of my life at that point because I loved him. But he focused on three things. Three things control your life. What you focus on, because every moment you're deciding what to focus on. The decisions you make about what to focus on, the decisions you make about what it means, and decisions you make of what to do. So that day, he focused on he hadn't fed his family. I know because he said it constantly. The meaning was the worst part. He said he was worthless because he'd not take care of his family, and he decided to leave. I focused on, wow, there's food here. What a concept. This is pretty amazing. And then I started looking around and saying, the thing that changed my whole life was, wow, someone cared enough about my family. They don't even want credit. My father always said, strangers don't care about you. Some stranger cares about our family. So if strangers care about me and my family, I want to care about strangers. And so that set me on this path that set me forward to say, my God, I've got to figure out how to do well because I want to pass this forward. So I've had 2 families and then 4 and then 8 and then gradually had a small company. I got my people involved and then 2 million people and then 4 million a year were 2 million from my foundation, 2 million from me. And then now in the last 10 years, I said I was going to feed 1 billion meals. And we did it in 8 years with Feeding America as my partner.
Wow.
And now I'm doing a 100 billion meal project. Right. And we're 30 billion meals into it in the first 2 years, which no one thought was even close to possible. It's because so many people are dying around the world because of the war in Ukraine, which is the breadbasket for Africa. So I tell you that because in order to figure that out, I remember I went to my original teacher, a man named Jim Rohn. He's a personal development speaker. And I said to him, I wonder if you can tell me, I've had 4 fathers. We've always been broke. We haven't had much food. I said, I want a different life for my family in the future. What are they doing wrong? And Jim was so brilliant. He said, Tony, let me ask you a question. He goes, your fathers were good men. He said, there's no question about that. He said, but they picked a profession where obviously they weren't either able to do well or they did well, but they weren't in control of their own future. And he said, think of it this way. Could a person make twice as much money in the same amount of time? Is that possible? And I said, well, obviously people do that. He goes, what about 5 times as much money? What about 10? What about 100 times as much money in the same amount of time? I said, yeah. He goes, how do they do that? I said, I don't know. He said, the way they do it is they understand something. We're all equals as souls on this planet, but we're not equal in the marketplace. He said, if you want a different experience for your family than your father, then here's all you need to remember. You have to figure out how to do more for others than anybody else in the marketplace over and over again. And you will build a brand and you will dominate and you will never have to worry about economics. If you can do more for other people than anybody else, if you can add more value, not the value you want to add, the value they need, he said, the whole game changes. And so I got obsessed. And he said, by the way, Tony, because I was saying, well, it's not fair that, a teacher makes, I think back then it was like $30,000 a year or something like that. And this billionaire guy who runs a hedge fund just made $1.8 billion last year. And he said, well, Tony, let's just use McDonald's as an example. He goes, McDonald's is a great company, helps a lot of people have a first job. If you go to McDonald's, you get minimum wage. Minimum wage back then, I forget what the number was, but it was tiny. He goes, it's not meant to be your ultimate job. You're ultimate to grow and to expand. But the reason you make so little is there's so little added value. Today, it's getting replaced by robots, right? In most of the fast food places. But it's like, you can go today and learn that job in an hour. They even have pictures if you can't speak English to do it, right? There's not a lot of added value. But he said, that guy that you complain about, the teacher, he goes, some teachers are good, some not so good. But they're not willing to put themselves on the line. They want to be paid the same amount and they want a pension, whether they teach well or not, whether students learn or not. I said, but I had some great teachers. He goes, I did too. But how many? Well, they changed my life. He goes, well, that's great, but they picked something safe. He goes, the guy that you're talking about, he got people a return of an average of 34% last year. That was when people were trying to get 5% returns. He said, Tony, he does that for foundations. He does that for businesses. Those people just got a jump. They made more and growing their university educations for their kids, whatever it is, like tenfold almost. So he made people more than 50 billion, so he deserves $1 billion. He added more value. So stop your judgment based on economics and what you think is spiritual or not, and ask yourself this question. If I could be smarter, should I? If I could be more giving, should I? If I grow financially, should I? He said, only limitation is you're not adding enough value. So that became my obsession. And that's how I built all my companies, all across all these different industries. I'm in so many different industries, and every one of my team's obsessed, like, how do we do more for people than anybody else in that industry? And that's how you get there. So it's a combination of understanding these patterns, but also understanding the most important pattern in life and in business is do more for others than anybody else. Then you emotionally prosper, but you can also, if you work it out in a business, financially prosper as well.
Well, one of the things we have that conversation about here with callers is, if you do choose to add value sitting next to somebody who's dying, right? You're a hospice nurse.
Yes.
And there's going to be a financial cap. Or like you, I had my life changed by a few teachers. There comes with an owning reality. My wife started out as a teacher before she became a professor and moved on. But I remember meeting her and being so perplexed at how, and this is young, arrogant, idiotic John, right? She was so thrilled with her Toyota Corolla.
Yes.
And I remember her saying, like, no, I'm a teacher. This is what we make. That means my life, I can't sit here dreaming of the Tahoes because I chose a $40,000 life, which means I have to choose this car and my house will look like this. And this is me owning reality and finding peace in this world that I've asked for. It's the mismatch, right? It's but I want this and it's not fair. So I got to knock you, instead of saying, no, this is the path I'm choosing, right? And I'm going to take ownership of this path, which I just love.
Yeah. And I think people that do that are the happiest people in the world. They've found a path, they know what they've chosen, and they feel great about it. It isn't about economics. I'm just trying to show people that your level of choice.
That's it. That's right.
Expands with the level of contribution that you make. And these people aren't lucky, because what I learned from Jim Rohn was success leaves clues. That if someone is successful, not for a day or a week or even a year, but decade after decade, if they've lost weight and kept it off 30 pounds for 15 years, if they've been in a relationship 25 years and they're passionate for each other, they're not just hanging out, if they've started with nothing, anybody can make money, anybody can get lucky, but they're financially free 20 years later still and are able to do beautiful things, they're not lucky. They're doing something different than you. So if you don't like where you are, instead of complaining, study them, because you can try and take 10 or 20 years to figure it out, or you can take someone who took 20 years to figure it out, find out what they learn in a few days or a few weeks or a few months, get yourself on the path to get there in half the time, 10% of the time. So my whole life became about how do I compress decades into days? And so I love wickedly smart people. So most of my books have been me, like I want to help people financially after 2008. I was so angry because I work with Paul Tudor Jones, one of the top 10 financial traders in history. And, these guys they're the kings of the mountain. And I looked around and saw what was happening and that a few people almost destroyed the entire world economy. It's like, I want to show people how to take care of themselves in this area. I wasn't known for finance. I taught finance before, but not known for it. It's like, I don't care. I'm gonna write a book. I hadn't written a book in 20 years. I didn't like writing books. I went to Simon & Schuster and said, I'm gonna write this book. And they said, Tony, you haven't written a book in 20 years. We'll give you $1 million more not to write a financial book. They literally offered me $1 million more. They said, because that's been picked over. It's a vulture. There's nothing there. I said, there's nothing there because it's all the same BS. I said, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go to the very best in the world and find out what they do. It's what I do best. And then teach that. Something like billionaire clients could use, but something just beginning the journey can use, right? And of course, wrote 3 #1 New York Times bestsellers in that category, but it was all extracting the patterns for them. You don't have to be a billionaire to see there's certain patterns around risk, for example, right? The most successful people don't take massive risks. Multi-billionaires don't do that. If they do, they don't stay multi-billionaires. They do something called asymmetrical risk reward.
There you go.
Right? So in the teachings that you do and your partners in crime have, who are done a lot of great work for people, so like managing their debt load is great. But these guys will go out and make an investment where they have no downside.
That's right.
And we have upside. And most people don't think that's even possible, or they have very limited downside with huge upside. I have a friend that took he took $40 million and turned it into $2 billion in 1 year. And he did it in 2008. And he did it because everybody thought real estate is going to go up forever. And he figured a way to do investments where his risk was he could be wrong 16 times and still make money. He wasn't wrong 16 times. That's how he made $2 billion, right? and I asked him one time, his name's Kyle Bass. And I said, Kyle, how would you teach this to like a child? He goes, Tony, I can't believe you asked me this. He said, I was just thinking, how can I teach it to my kids about 6 months ago? And I found the answer. And I said, what's the answer? He goes, asymmetrical risk reward is the least amount of risk, most amount of upside. So I kept asking the question, what's an investment I can make that has no downside, I cannot lose, and only upside? And I said, I can't think of one. He goes, most people won't even ask the question. But he said, I asked it for 6 months till I got the answer. And he goes, the answer was nickels. I said, nickels? He said, yeah, if you invest in a nickel, it never goes down. It's always worth a nickel. But he said, it costs 9 cents to make a nickel. That's how our government works. He said, it won't last forever. He said, they used to do that with pennies. Pennies used to be made of copper. Now there's almost no copper. It's mostly tin in pennies. But here's what you need to know. Those pennies that were the old ones were twice as much, 3 times as much, just because of the content. He goes, just the content itself, it costs 9 cents to make it, but the actual, if you were to melt that smelt value of that 5 cents, is really 7.5 cents. So he says, I can make a 25 to 30% return on day one. I go, but you can't melt the money. He goes, no, you can. He goes, but you don't need to, because he said, like I said, when they change the game, the numbers will go up. So he called the Fed and bought all the nickels. He bought 20 million nickels, truckloads of the nickels, had his kids carry all the nickels, put them in there. He said, if I could push a button right now and buy all nickels, I'd make my entire thing that. He goes, because I'm up 25 to 30% instantly. And he goes, there's no downside. So that mindset is what can shift people. They don't have to live this small little world, but they have to be willing to understand that 4-letter word that most people avoid at all costs. It's called risk. It's not about not taking risks. It's about taking intelligent, asymmetrical risks. Those are the people that win at the highest level. And that's true with your family, asymmetrical risks, emotional risks, right? The downside is so little compared to the upside of you stepping up and telling the truth, or breaking through in that relationship, or going after your kid and not letting this stuff continue. But most people, especially after COVID, nobody wanted risk of anything. They didn't want to, I remember I was telling people the 6-foot thing, there's no science behind it. I was telling people that in 2020, and people were online slamming me and everything else. And like 4 months ago, Fauci admitted under oath that the 6-foot thing had no science behind it, that he didn't know how it kind of appeared. And people walking around like lemmings, freaking out if someone was within 4 feet of them. We have to take risks to have life. Can you imagine the people that settled this country and what they had to do to cross the oceans to come here to deal with this world, the risks they took so we could have this. They would be so embarrassed by us, right? It's like, we're not willing to take any risks for anything. Time to take some intelligent risks. That's how your life changes.
Well, and what I love about you is it's the gift you have is, and I say this with all due respect, you don't care where a person's been. It's almost like you're blinded by the light of how bright it could be wherever they could end up, but they don't see it. And there's a relentless chasing after people that you do that is so infectious because you just won't let people settle or quit on themselves. And I love it, dude.
If they raise their hand, I don't just walk on the street and stop people. I used to do that.
Oh, I've learned that. I've learned that the hard way, dude. Now I ruined many a party being like, well, actually, that's the wrong diet. No more. If you ask me, I'll tell you. But other than that, I'm out. Yes.
But my 20s, I did that stuff. But today, if someone raises their hand, they're willing, or they get dragged there by somebody else. But what I do is I create an environment where I don't have to tell them that. Again, I give them an experience where their energy is lifted so much. I mean, people won't sit for a 3-hour movie. And we go 12 hours a day for 4 straight days and nights. And, we just went for 19,000 people in New York. But by the way, we have, since COVID, we have about half the people usually, or a third of the people are experiencing it online. That, we start here at 10 a.m. and we go 12 hours, right? Sometimes 13 to 11 p.m. And guess what? The people are in Sydney, Australia, are starting at midnight. And they're going from midnight to 1 in the afternoon for 4 straight days, and we lose 2% of the people.
I love it, dude.
Because we make it that compelling. So when the experience is that compelling, it's not words, it's the experience. When your energy is that high, what seemed impossible becomes not only possible, but you find yourself taking action. But most people since COVID, they don't even realize how low their energy has dropped because everybody has. People work at home. Their tempo is different. Their energy is different. And it's like we're fish in water. We don't notice. But you could have imagine you got a couple that totally love each other. I mean, they adore each other. And they're both in peak energy states. They take care of their body. And they deal with challenges. And you know what kind of relationship they're going to have. They love each other and they got lots of energy. It's going to be an awesome relationship. You get 2 people that are worn down by daily life. So many soccer practices, ballet practices, financial stress in the new business or my job or something else, someone sick in the family. And they're like, doing okay. They love each other just as much, but it is not the same relationship. You know it as well as I do. And if you get people that are burnt into the ground who love each other, they'll say stuff and do things that will really hurt the relationship. So the level of your energy, as simplistic as that sounds, is where it starts. And it doesn't matter how much sleep you have. It doesn't matter how much food you've eaten. What matters is the psychological habit of energy. And so one of the things we do in 3 or 4 days is people condition their nervous system at a higher level of energy, and then everything changes. When you're in a peak state of mind, I mean, have you ever done this? You ever been in a lousy state where you can't remember your own cell number, or how to spell a difficult word like you know the answer, but what the hell? Yeah. And yet there's other times when you get on the flow, when you're in a peak state where you do something or say something, it goes perfect. You go, I don't even know how I did that, but I'm impressed. I like that. I want to do that again. It's all state driven. So we show people how to change their state. Because most people say to me, well, I just don't feel like it. Well, if I waited till I felt like it, I couldn't have done 90% of what I've done. I've learned how to change how I feel so I can do it. And that's one of the most important skills of life that we certainly don't get taught in school or just about anywhere else. But when we get people in an environment like that, they come out saying it's the greatest experience of their life because they experience themselves at their best.